All right. Happy Spooktober. It just occurred to me that this is Shally's alley, and there's nothing more alley than October, right? And visions of a dark alley with ghouls and all that. I should have come up with a better Halloween, plan than just having a regular show. But you know me, I'm very spontaneous, so I don't. But I do have a really cool guest, a longtime friend of mine. Man, we go, I don't know, we go so far back that I don't think that they had plugged in the internet when we met. Not really sure if they had, maybe they had just put fresh batteries in it and just started it going online or whatever. But Kevin Walters is our special guest today. And Kevin is well regarded for his cooking skills. You thought I was going to say something else, huh, Kevin? Kevin once came up to me and said, "I need a Colombian recipe for a presentation I'm doing at SourceCon." And I was like, "What? You're presenting on SourceCon on Colombian food?" And he's like, "No, no, no. It's a whole play on this." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I get it." So I gave him my sancocho recipe. You never did tell me if you actually ate that.
You know, I didn't make it myself,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
did. I did try it at a Cuban place,
Oh, you
and
had it, but you didn't make it. Got it.
yeah, I had it,
Probably
and
a
it
good
was
thing.
very
Yeah.
good. It's kind of similar to, we have a Jamaican soup that's spicy, and no, I don't really like pork and all that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
you
Doesn't
could
have to
make
be. Sancocho can be fish. It can
fish,
be
chicken. Yeah,
chicken. It could be oxen. That sometimes that's the more common one is the little bits and pieces of the ox that are not typically, they're kind of hard and chewy, but with the slow cooking, it makes them tender so you can actually eat them. You could use lamb. I mean, basically, a lot of times it's actually just a mixture of whatever odds and ends you got. So there'll be a little bit of fish, a little bit of oxtail, and it's the leftover soup. Every country, every culture has a leftover dish, like Bubbles and Squeak in England and all
and
that.
and and Jamaican food, oxtail is a delicacy as well. Like, that's one of our like premier dishes. So
Oh, so that's not considered a leftover. That's actually like you go out of your way to make it.
yeah, yeah,
Got it.
and
Yeah.
it the example you just gave shows how people don't really understand, but cultures intertwined.
Oh
There's a
yeah.
lot of influence that, you know from other cultures intertwining historically, whether it be through whether it was through slavery, European colonialism, whatever it was, or just being migrated to another country, um, and the infusion of that culture on that country, and the combination of the food transforms the food.
It does.
So
It's magic.
there's a
It really.
historical context, which means most people don't realize we're all intertwined. We're more
Oh, 100%.
connected than
Yeah.
we are different,
100%.
whether you believe it or not.
And how spices make it from, one place of the world to another, like some obscure Asian spice being used in like an Aztec dish, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, how did that happen?
Yeah,
Like wasn't there a bunch of water, but you don't realize how much land mass there was. I was reading about how the um, land between Russia and Alaska. There wasn't water there. You could clear walk across it. So when people were like, "Well, how would he get here?" Well, they walked. Actually, that was land at some point. So it's
oh
pretty
yeah,
amazing. And talk about Jamaica, the whole um, Leeward Islands and the Western Caribbean and all that has a lot in common with where I grew up, because where I grew up is the home of the Carib Indians, and that's where the Caribbean gets its name. The
yep,
Carib Indians were one of the original peoples of that area that got mixed in and did a lot of trading and ended up, so some Carib are in the Dominica Island and Jamaica and some of the other islands as well. So it's definitely intermingled. The,
and,
the
and
flavors
that's
for
where
sure.
and that's when the Europeans came over to the islands and the Caribbeans, right,
Hmm.
to trade with the indigenous people at that time, the Caribbean Indians. That's where they intertwined and exchanged spices for
Spices and
different
food
things that
and
they couldn't get, and so
corn, like corn. That's like that's so American. And when I say American, I don't mean United States. I mean like the Americas. Like
Right.
coming from the whole this western side of the world, because we had that was our grain, and then their grain was rice on the other
Yeah,
side. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So
it is.
in sancocho, you definitely use some rice and also some root vegetables, but usually they put the rice. So you make the soup, then you use a spoon to scoop out from the plate of rice, and then kind of dunk it in the sancocho. So you wet the rice with the spoon instead of putting it
Which
in
is
there.
which is similar to gumbo.
Oh yeah, that's
Think about
right.
that.
Yeah.
See, there's another like think about New Orleans gumbo and how spicy. It's pretty. It's almost the same concept.
Wow. Okay. Yes, but where did filet come from? That one I don't know. That's like cassava or something like that. Not exactly sure.
Empanadas, ceviche. There's so much we could talk
Or yeah,
about.
like in Brazil with the feijoada, they use it's something sort of similar to filet, I think. But
Yeah, yeah.
so
But it's a
I'm getting
beautiful thing.
hungry here. I'm getting really hungry. But I was dying to ask you. So on your LinkedIn profile, why do you have a chef's hat?
So why do I have a chef's?
Outfit. Sorry.
Oh, yes, my chef's
On your
outfit.
LinkedIn profile,
Yeah, that I'm wearing
like
right
on your
now.
LinkedIn
Look.
picture, you have a what looks like one of those double-breasted chef, yeah, like from there's a school I can't remember, the Culinary Arts Institute or something like
Yeah,
that. Is that what that is?
that's what it is. So,
No way.
um, you know, my brand, the Diversity Chef,
Uh huh.
and I use the magic of food to help organizations like transform and be more equitable, right? Through understanding like food, understanding culture, and providing like culinary workshops and consulting with them on best practices and whether they want to build a talent pipeline or communicate with different cultures. I think a great avenue to do that is through something that we're all passionate about
Connecting with
organically
food.
without even
Yeah.
thinking about it
Right.
is food. And so hence that what you saw, what was it, a year and a half ago,
Hmm.
Con in
Yep. Yep.
2022 was the foundation of that, where sitting around one day and just like all geniuses like you, right? Self-appointed genius, I guess, but
I wasn't there. No.
I was just saying, sitting around, I was just thinking, like, man, what's a good way? People are still struggling to connect with, underserved and marginalized communities.
Yeah.
And I started just thinking about my own self and my own
Experiences
story
and
and background.
yeah.
And one of my best friends, who's Indian, when I worked in Atlanta, which is where you and I have a lot of history,
Yep.
I worked for a software tech company. I was like supply chain management, and it was like 50% of our population was Indian. And I was talking about being immersed in the culture. Like I knew everything
Mhm.
about the visas. We had our dev center, and I would recruit from India, transfer people to the US. Long and short of it is, hey, I started, guys were like, hey, why don't you come to lunch? All my candidates. I think I hired like half the companies, Shally. Seriously. In the 4 or 5 years that I was there, literally, when I looked at my LinkedIn profile after I left there, I literally had hired almost 2,000 people that were in the company. And it was,
Wow.
and so
And
going
you
to
talk about
lunch,
diversity. I mean, Indian food from the country of India is so varied, from beef eaters in the
mhm,
south to
north,
diehard vegetarians in the
mhm,
north, and extreme spiciness in the east, and
yep,
seafood in the west, and they couldn't be so different. And that's a good representation. So I get the analogy, definitely. And you know what? I'm going to add to that. You might have, maybe you were going to go this way anyway, but it's an easy way for people to connect with diversity, because it sometimes is the first introduction to that culture. I mean, if
I-
it doesn't matter what culture you are, whether you're Chinese or whatnot, and you've always you grew up around Chinese people, you never knew anything about other people, and all of a sudden you have a meal that is from another culture, before you've even met anybody from that culture. So it
you,
is a
you,
door opener.
Charlie, you're spot on. And you're looking at a kid, right? Parents, family immigrants from Jamaica, grew up in the South Bronx, 10466. Google that zip code today. I dare you to walk down that area. I would never go there myself. Parents migrate here from Jamaica, South Bronx, like near the old Yankee Stadium. And, then we moved to the North Bronx, 241st Street, more like towards White Plains, where I'm submerged and thrown into a very diverse neighborhood of Italian, Polish, Black, white,
Real melting
Spanish.
pot.
And you talk about a melting pot, which is why they say New York is like the biggest melting pot. There were, as a kid, some of these other kids didn't even speak English. And so you think we still were able to play together, have fun. And I got to learn a lot about their culture. Of course, you get to go home with your friends, then their parents are serving them dinner. You take a bite, right? And they come to your house. And then you get a little curious and say, you know what, that was pretty good. I want to, at that time, there was these things called libraries. I don't know if they still exist
I
now,
never heard
but
of that. No.
but we would actually open a book and start like reading a little bit
Wait, what's a
about
book? No, just kidding.
what's a book. Yeah. And so you're exactly right. A lot of times the introduction that we have, it's a soft and warm introduction. And it's a way that, is a little, you have to be a little risky, right, to try something. But once
Yeah,
you
yeah,
overcome that curiosity, it's just like understanding another demographic group. You realize that, hey, you know what? It's not that bad. It's more, actually, I like this food. And I might
right,
not like
right.
their
Yeah,
culture.
yeah. It's an easy way into it for sure. Yeah.
Food is food, like they said, what do they say about food and get into a man's soul, like for a woman? If you want to get to a man, right, get to through his stomach and
I think
and
you can
and by
get to
cooking.
anybody through their stomach. I mean, come on. It's like, yeah, you definitely, if you have a bad meal, you tell everybody about it. If you have a good meal, you tell everybody about it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things, if
What
you,
was? I'm just curious. What was your like? Have you tried? Do you remember like your first international dish that you tried and how you were introduced? Was it through a buddy or a friend
you're
or?
gonna you're gonna laugh. This is nobody's ever asked me this question, but I know exactly what it was.
Wow, good.
You
I love
gotta
it.
remember that I grew up in another country. So my first it, just try not to laugh. My first international dish, my first foreign dish was
Hot
when I was
dog.
probably 7 or 8, maybe 9. It was middle school, and I went to a American kid's house. Their parents were there for work, for business, and they were in my school. And I went to their house, and it was the first time I'd ever had meatloaf and mashed potatoes, which was
Wow.
apparently a common Sunday
Yeah.
meal for them. And I'm like, what is this? It's a giant, like, it looked like bread. They sliced it like bread and had a boiled egg in the middle, and they
Wow.
sliced it like bread. And I'm like, is this bread? What is this? And then there's like a glob of mashed potatoes. I'm like, what's that?
That
That
could be
was
a little scary.
it was, yeah. And then the gravy, I'm like, oh my God. And I was like,
Were
wow.
there eggs? Did they boil eggs and then crush them in the mashed potatoes? Because some people make mashed potatoes that way.
No, they didn't have, it was plain old, just,
Stovetop.
honestly, I think it was so bland, it might have even been powdered mashed potatoes for all I know.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it was very bland. The whole thing was very bland, considering this is the Caribbean, right? So,
That's pretty cool.
but that was my first exposure to, and I didn't know this at the time, but later on, because at that age you just don't really pay attention to this. Later on, I realized that they were Mormon. So that wasn't just my first American meal, experiencing something completely foreign, but it was also my first exposure to non-Catholic, non-Jewish people. Because where I grew
Yeah.
up, I was part of the Jewish community, and everybody else was Catholic. So it's like, you're either Jewish or Catholic. There wasn't a whole lot of anything else.
Wow.
So this is my first exposure to people who believe in Christ but are not Christian. So that was also very interesting because their culture and their religious faith was different than what I understood to be Christian. And later on, I realized what it was, which was it's a completely different
Wow.
faith. So
That's
yeah,
pretty cool. That's
very, very different.
it's funny that you remember that because
It was very
I think,
shocking for me.
yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if that was a good or bad experience, but it was probably such a different experience for
Very
you.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I don't know. I will admit I don't know the history of meatloaf.
I
I'll,
have no idea. But I did
I think,
like it. I liked the meatloaf. I didn't quite like the potatoes all that much. And
yeah,
now I eat mashed potatoes, but the way my family likes to make them is with garlic and cheesy, and it's like just a lot more flavor. But anyways,
yeah,
so that that's diversity, right? And folks just don't, like you were saying before, folks don't understand that diversity isn't black or Hispanic. And that's what I hear a lot about. And we've had many guests on the show that talk about what diversity really means. You and I have had these conversations before about what diversity really means. So, how, talk about the digital divide, right? Because that's something that you wanted to bring up and how that impacts. And let's go down
yeah.
that road.
I think it's important to understand that, like, you know, right now we're in a, we look at technology and it's revolutionary with, AI, right? They're how fast it went to market, how many users adopted this technology. And when you think about, the underserved and marginalized community, you know, just look at Chat GPT. You have the free version, right? And then you also have the premium, right? Where it features where you pay extra. Well, guess what? In, underserved communities, underrepresented communities, they may not have the resources, the funding to offer that to that community. And so what you're doing is by making certain like advanced features more complex or selective, there's other demographic groups that's left out of that learning. And so it creates a divide in that by time the premium features get advanced, like you have, rollout number 10, and they allow, other features to be free,
Mm.
they're constantly trying to catch up and left behind. So the digital
Oh,
divide
okay.
was huge in that, unless the government comes in and mandates and actually provides funding for these communities to actually have accessibility, we're talking about like, my daughter who's 14 has a Mac. I have like 3 PCs in my home.
Mhm.
My internet speed is, like, I don't even know what number it is. It's so fast, but it's not like that as far as in underserved communities because the infrastructure may not be as good, and also they may not have the
Mm.
tools. So it does provide this what we call technology divide and learning curve. Not to
Interesting.
mention the educational resources are
Yeah, and
completely
that's
different.
not racial either. It could be all kinds of other reasons why communities are marginalized. That I was reading an article. I wish I had tracked it better, but it was an article about in these communities that you're describing, there are significant amounts of people who have chosen not to have internet at home, even if it's available in their area for various reasons. They could
No,
be monetary, they could be cultural. So there are, basically it's there. It may not be the best quality, but it's there, and they've actually chosen not to have it. So they're
but
conscientiously uh, falling into the divide on purpose. Now, like I said, I wish I had the article bookmarked or something because they list some reasons. There were various reasons. It wasn't just it wasn't poverty. It wasn't like can't afford it. That wasn't it. It was much more than that. It was don't
they,
want
they,
it, don't care for it.
they're probably out here in the desert over here in Nevada in a bunker somewhere in the
No,
middle of
I'm not. I'm telling you, it
nowhere.
was like there were religious reasons, there were social
Yeah,
reasons, there were like
yeah.
there cultural. Like we're not allowed to use that kind of technology. Uh, Censorship. Parents that didn't want their children exposed to things that. And let's face it, I'm saying censorship, which is a bad word, but let's face it, as a parent, there are things you don't want your children to see.
Oh yeah, and
So.
I have. It's not you. What you're saying is spot on. I have several friends, very educated, that have chosen to homeschool their kids.
Mhm.
Um, their kids don't have cell phones.
And they monitor their
Um,
their internet time. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking
yeah,
about.
the
Yeah.
internet time is monitored, and look, we live in a different Shally from when you and I were growing coming up, and now we're in a different era. I mean, look what's happening on the internet. Look
Yeah,
at the things that go viral, and people actually, kids react to it. Then after that, we
yeah,
got to watch, and we're not going to go off topic, but some kid will walk into a high school and start blasting and trying to shoot everybody. So
yeah.
it can be weaponized, and I think
It can
that's the
be.
fear, right? Is
Yeah.
to
So
put
the divide is sometimes intentional, because there's not enough, control over what could
yeah,
possibly happen, and or they're just not they're not aware of the tools or whatever. But what you're saying is that that divide causes a significant amount of disparity, right?
absolutely. It causes
And
a very
so,
clear delineation in
mhm,
educational learning resources, accessibility, and disparity in advancement of knowledge. I mean, knowledge is power, right? Education is power, and it
yeah,
also leads to higher economic privileges. So,
right. So it starts early. You have a displaced community that has, little to no access, or has access but it's not very good to technology, and so they grow up with not the ability to use computers, and then they go for an interview, and the interview requires them to use a computer, but it's not something that's familiar with them, and the job has nothing to do with computers. The job is something they're qualified for, but they're not qualified at filling out forms on the internet. And so now they're almost, I don't want to say banned because that's a bad word, but they're blocked. They're inhibited from
and
applying for the job.
and that's why we need to make technology fungible for all types of people,
Mm,
right? Like, whether you have a text to apply tool or some kind of tool where you could actually, for warehouse workers or high volume business, where people can use their phones, right? They may not have a computer, and a lot of the workers in that industry don't have laptops. They don't use computers, and a lot
right,
of
right, 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 right. Yeah, frontline
kids in that,
workers. Yeah,
yeah, front line. So we
yeah.
need to. I think that's also the beauty of technology, is to make it fungible, so everyone still can do their job and be productive in society.
The great disintermediator. Fun story. So I was just in your town, HR Tech, and I was at the HR Tech conference. Did you get a chance to go in there, or?
I was there. I was actually in the expo helping out, but I'm sorry I didn't see you, but I was
I
there.
was I had a I was doing podcasts, and I ended up sitting at the booth for the entire time. But did you see there was this company, just what you were just talking about? There was this company that won the startup award for the new technology, and it was one of the most, um, I want to say it was one of the biggest innovations. There was not a lot of innovation at the HR Tech. There was a lot of repackaging, but not a lot of like straight up new stuff.
Yeah.
And of course everybody had AI, but this company was doing something completely different. They were dedicated to what you just described. They have a text to apply application process, that was in, it also works for referrals. So people who don't have computers at work because they are in the field, in a car, there's a lot of frontline workers in many different industries. I mean, um, technicians that do X-ray and cardiology and stuff
Yeah.
like that. They're not sitting at a terminal, right? And they might not even they might have one computer for the entire floor because they need to use a computer for work, but they're on their phones, right? So this company, this is what they do. They allow you to have to fill out an application through just starting from a text to say you're interested, and then it sort of not interviews, but it incrementally asks you the questions that it needs for you to complete an application. So you can apply from a phone, and by the way, it doesn't even have to be a smartphone. It just has to be a phone that has texting capability, which, um, even the old flip phones still have that,
Yeah.
so this is really cool because it's exactly what you talked about. So
Yeah.
how do you, when you talk to clients, and organizations, what is it that what's your, I don't want to say your selling point because you're not selling, but what is your, how do you persuade them to think about this? How do you
You know,
open their eyes to it?
it's it's funny. It's actually easier than I thought. Maybe I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
credible,
Well,
but
I'm glad. I'm
I
happy,
just
but how?
yeah, I just ask questions like, tell me about your experience with food. Like, tell me about some international food and how you may have tried it. I just try to find out a little bit about them personally. And most people will say, yeah, a friend introduced me, or yeah, I tried such and such, and what I like to. And then we'll talk about the experience and the journey going there. Did you like it? Was it bad? Good? And then I also talk about what I do is how I use the magic of food to make organizations more inclusive. And then they go, wow, that sounds cool. And transform companies. Well, how do you do that? Well, I think, put together culinary workshops. A lot of this is going to be done here in what I'd say one of the major food capitals of the world, right here in Vegas. A team of chefs besides myself. Like you've been to Vegas, and bar none has the best food in the world,
You
right?
could
And
get just about any
even
kind
the
of,
local restaurants, I always tell people
yeah.
the sous chefs that worked under Gordon Ramsay that's opened his own restaurant is probably even better than Gordon Ramsay because he's so big now, right? So he has to he probably doesn't even touch
Yeah,
his
he's an
food.
icon, right, right, right.
Yeah. So you know, we'll do on-sites, we'll do experiences for organizations to help them understand about the historical context of food.
Hmm.
But it's fun, it's engaging. It's not going to be just like, hey, let me cook you a dish. It'll be very interactive, hands-on, as well as, you know, including instruction and teachings and learnings about how to identify, build talent, right? Um, about building ERGs, right? Or having other people from like having other chefs with these skills and these backgrounds, I think is key because they can actually talk about their culture and talk about having an indigenous chef, right? Or having someone from Jamaica or whatever country or Colombia. You can talk really about your country and the historical context and how it has been infused with other cultures. And I think that gives people more of a empathy and common understanding of
Gotcha.
why
Starts to
diversity
break the
makes
ice,
sense.
starts to chip away at that frozen block of, this is alien, I don't understand it. Okay.
Yeah,
So it's a,
and who doesn't like to eat? I mean, whether you cook or you're a foodie or not, I don't know anyone that says, nah, like if you don't
yeah, I
eat,
don't
you're
need food.
gonna like.
That
So there's
food's not for me.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't do
there's the
food,
point. Yeah, I've never had anyone that says, yeah, you know what, I'm not a food eater.
right? I mean, you could be picky and you can have things you like and don't like, but you still gotta eat food.
If you don't eat food, you don't want to live,
Let me
right?
make something for you that meets all of your requirements of non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, etc. We could still make something for you. Hey, that's part of diversity, right?
And
Um,
what I want to provide, Shally, and what we're doing is to provide like I just talked to a client in Australia last night, and they, HR consulting company, they want to possibly do this with their clients, but they're all virtual. And I'm really trying to get them to do something on site with some of their bigger clients.
hmm,
But because of the layout and landscape, if you've ever been to Australia, it's being
yeah, I
such a
used to live
big
there.
country.
Yep.
It's There's so many locations that spread across from each other. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yep.
Like most offices are all over the place. So um, we can still give that experience. And I don't know if you've ever. It's like watching a cooking show.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll see a lot of YouTube videos come out. I'm doing a soft launch now, but by the first of the year, you'll see a lot of my content, YouTube videos, and free stuff come out, and with training and showing people like how food itself,
Hmm.
right, and culture combine, and even the texture of food. When you think how different foods together, even though they don't look like they would be, they make sense once
They
they're
combine
combined.
and form something better.
And that's done a lot
Mm,
in the Asian culture, right? When you go to a Japanese restaurant and you're like, hey, what's this cucumber doing next to, you know,
yeah. Fish and
whatever.
cream cheese. Right. Interesting. So it's an icebreaker, and then it's a metaphor. Um, and then how do you turn it into actionable? I pretty much I got the whole first
Yeah.
half of that right, but then what?
That's the secret sauce.
Ah, okay, all right, all right.
So
Fair enough. That's that. Yeah, fair enough. I don't
no,
need
no.
to.
Well, the actionable is, with diversity. I think at the end of the day, what most companies struggle with is they don't know. They want to know what they don't know, and they don't even know where to start.
Mhm.
And so this allows me to even just come in and look and do what I call a audit, right, or analysis of telling you, hey, from a maturity standpoint, I could tell you a lot about organizations without even talking to them. Or look at your website and I could tell you, oh, you're using stock images instead of ERGs, or people, showing like what's going on inside your company. That means you
Yep.
probably don't have a lot of ERGs or team building events, right? We being able to really look
Not
across.
knowing where to start is, I think that's a really, I like to divide questions into, um, the known, what you know about the problem. When I'm doing an audit and trying to identify root cause analysis, right?
Mhm.
I like to ask, what are the things that you know? So you go to an organization and say, what do you know is an issue or a concern or friction point in diversity? Then there's the, what do you know but don't talk about? Right? There's what you know and talk about. Then there's what do you know but don't talk about, the hidden stuff.
And
And
they
then
may
there's
not
the,
want to tell you that.
right, but as a consultant, that's my job, right? So what do you
Right.
know that you don't talk about? And then the third one, the third level deeper is, what do you not know? And believe it or not, the I don't know where to start is one of the most common answers to that, because they're
Yeah.
almost like, of course they say I don't know what I don't know. Of course everybody can say I don't know what I don't know. That right? But I have to drill past that and go to the, what is the unknown that is keeping you up at night, that that's making you worry. You're worried but you don't know. And that's where they say I don't know where to start. I want to create a sourcing program but I don't know where to start. I want to create a diversity program but I don't know where to start. That I don't know where to start is probably bigger than we realize.
Yeah. That's why they're paying us as a consultant,
That's true,
because
yeah.
the
I don't know
things
where to
that
start,
they
yeah.
do know and the things that
They do something
they,
about.
they can do something about,
Right.
right? And it actually may be linear. Like most companies are like, oh yeah, we need to hire talent, so I'm just going to focus on talent pipeline and
Hmm.
recruiting and sourcing, and that's one small piece.
Right.
And we see all the volatility in the market right
Yep.
now because, hey, you forgot, we talk about being invited to the party, sitting at the table, wanting to be there, belonging. And so you wind up having a rotating door. So it's the unknown, like you said, and those are the things that they want to know, because
Unknown,
those are the
unspoken.
real
Yeah.
pain points that's hurt most people.
Exactly, right. The known and spoken, they would have done something about it. The
Yeah.
known and unspoken, they're hiding it for whatever reasons. Not hiding it for evil reasons, but they're just hiding it because it's hard to talk about. But the
And it's
unknown,
it's it's
unspoken,
it's also what, if you think about it, gives them the competitive edge. If
could be.
I diagnose your business right now and I say, Shally, you know what? You're an awesome influencer, but I looked at your site and I realized your SEO strategy. You might want to do this, do that, A, B, C, and
Mhm.
D.
And that'll help a
You're
lot.
like,
Yeah,
wait a minute, how'd you do that? Well, I was like, hey, I've been testing your site for 6 months, and you know what?
yeah,
This is the hypothesis I came with, and I know this is what would work. You would sign a check right away if I could prove
yep,
that theory to you, because you'd be
absolutely.
like, hey, you were doing this without me knowing, and I didn't know it, and you found
It's
something I didn't know.
worth the risk, even if I don't think that it's going to work. It's worth the risk because
Yeah.
it might, right? And that's, CFOs that are good CFOs will take risks with money if they think that the payoff is big enough. They're not, a CFO's job is not to prevent the company from spending money. It's to encourage the company to spend money in the right places. And sometimes spending money on something that is not, that is an unproven area, but that could have a big payout, is well worth it because, as you said, it's the competitive edge. But I want to flip the script. This wouldn't be Shally's Alley and this wouldn't be my show if I didn't ask the tough questions. So get ready for this one.
Okay.
Um, Talk to me about layoffs. We're at the end of, arguably, we're at the end of essentially a year of layoffs. January saw the most layoffs in recent history.
Yeah.
March, second most. February, third most. And then from there, you know, April, May, June, July started to get smaller and smaller. September has been the fewest. October is looking like it's going to beat September as far as the fewest layoffs. So we're done with layoffs. But how does this year of like just shit canning people, how did that affect displaced communities? And my real question is, did it disproportionately affect them, or did it have a different than expected outcome?
Yeah, I think it disproportionately affected marginalized communities because if you think about
See, I was worried about that.
if you think about in statistically, this is known. If you go out there and do the research and look at the math, the pandemic
Hmm.
disproportionately affected marginalized communities
Oh
more than
yeah,
other
right.
demographic
Yeah,
groups,
that's true. Right, that's
right?
true.
Any the bird flu, anything that happens in society, right? Because
Has an
the
amplified
system is not set up to support marginalized communities.
mhm,
Is set up to support dominant groups.
the
You're going to be
majority. Right.
adversely affected if you're on the outside, which because that means that the groups that get the support first and the resources first are the dominant groups. So they're ahead of the line. So in a layoff, what happens is when companies, right, look at diversity as like an add-on or ad hoc project or a latch on, for them, the first thing they're
Yeah,
going to do is, hey, we're going to get rid of diversity. We're going to get rid of all our DEI people. We're going to get rid
that's
of
what I
all our
thought.
underrepresented talent. We're going to
I was
keep,
hoping that wasn't the case, but I'm getting
yeah.
that that is.
And unfortunately, it's a short-sighted view because the real pain of the market is not so much that companies just overspent and everyone just kind of went crazy on hiring. Real pain in the market is because for the first time, we're in a true, what I call transformational culture clash. We have four different generations of people
In the
working together
workforce. Yeah. No, or not.
or not. Yeah.
Or not working together.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that in itself is diversity. And companies need to understand, like, I got to communicate, if I'm a baby boomer, I got to communicate differently with the Gen Zs. I got to communicate differently with millennials. Everybody has a different set of needs that they want from their employer. And you have to speak their language and communicate in the means or use the
Or
technology. In other words,
right.
if you're on laptops and you're asking your workers, right, who mostly use cell phones and you're not mobilized and you don't have mobile,
Tools.
applications,
Mhm.
are they going to be productive when a lot
Yeah,
of them would? So you see there can even be a divide within
that
just
makes sense.
culture
Yeah.
itself and across generationally if the communication gaps are between generations. Like people, you remember, I'll say this, you remember when you were younger and somebody older would say something, you're like, I don't know what they're talking about. That sounds like, hey, back Shally, we used to use like, the A track, or something. And you're like, what? What's an A track?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like now you asked the kid, I asked somebody yesterday, I said, were you around when there were payphones? And she actually said, yeah, I actually kind of came in on the tail end of that. And I was shocked. And I was like, look how time has changed.
Don't be so shocked, man. Last time I was in Maine and I was at a restaurant, they had a payphone.
That I would have taken a picture.
I did. I posted it on the internet and I said, "What is this? I can't tell. I can't recognize. I don't recognize it. What is this thing?"
I
The
remember having to
comments were
wait.
hilarious. The comments were like, "Don't touch it. It's contagious."
Yeah, but I remember having to wait behind people banging on that door, like, hey, I need to make a call. I got to get picked up. And the guy
Right.
would be there. Think about if that happened today, there'd be so many fights. Like people would have no patience, right? But back then,
Wow. Yeah.
like think about, and then having to have coins in your pocket. Like now, my daughter, I try to give her cash. She goes, Dad, I use Apple Pay. Everybody
Right.
takes Apple Pay. I'm like, that's right. Nobody uses coins or cash. Cash is going to
Not
be
really.
absolute obsolete soon.
My daughter
So
has a couple of bills in her collection, and they're literally novelties for her. It's like, I'm gonna hold on to this. I'm like, no, spend it. Like, no, I'm just gonna put it in my collection. Like, wow, okay, yeah, definitely not. So, all right. So the answer to my question then is yes. This the season of
Absolutely, yes.
layoffs had higher than normal, which that's saying it horrible. It's horrible to say layoffs are normal, but the point is that it had a higher than normal effect on
Disproportionately,
communities. Yeah,
yes.
disproportionate. And what about what about this kind of the flip side, not the flip side of that, but 90 degrees from that? What about this whole like return to office stuff? Um, I have a personally, I'm just going to come out and say it. I believe that companies that are forcing people to return to office are essentially being lazy about not laying off people that they probably should be laying off, and they're literally expecting them to quit
Yes.
because there's absolutely no reason why after you've been successfully doing your job for 3 years from remote that you should be forced to go into the office. There's just no reason if you've successfully done. Now there are definitely lots of, I mean, controversial Elon Musk and his rant about you better return to the office because our factory workers have to go to the office, in order to work, and the delivery drivers that bring you your food, they have to go to the office to go to work. I understand that, but those are not people who successfully did their job remotely and are being asked to come to the office. Those are people who always had to come to the office. They were called essential workers. And even in the worst of the pandemic, I worked for a company that was literally an infrastructure company. We had people who had permission legally to go out to go to the office because they were essential workers. Those people have always been in the office. So you're telling people who you sent home and they've done their job successfully for 3 years to come back, right? And then you're not increasing their pay because I've read some studies recently. There was an article that I was reading that said that it can be anywhere from $9,000 to $14,000 more expensive to go to an office for an employee. Gas money, parking, lunch. Even if it's not lunch, it's takeout. Even if it's not takeout, it's pack your
Yeah.
lunch. Even if it's not that, it's dry clean. So there's all these. So you're
Dry
forcing people
cleaning.
to go back to right. You're forcing people to go back to the office and not giving them raises, and maybe these are people who were able to get this job because it was remote. Now what? They can't do the job. So that's another kind of discrimination.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's
I'll
it,
stop ranting. Your turn.
no. You, what you're saying is, it's a bullseye exactly, true because I believe, and from talking to T leaders, and I won't mention names of companies, it was an intentional strategy to instead of having to pay someone a severance, right, and lay them off, it was a way of switching the responsibility to, hey, you know what? We'll switch the role to, hey, you got to come on site or you're basically resigning, right?
That's
So
a
if you
stupid
can't do it,
strategy.
then
It's
you're the
gonna
one that's leaving
backfire.
us and we don't have to let you go. And therefore, it allows
I
us
mean,
to,
how many wrongful termination suits are going to come up because you're black and you got asked to come back to the office and you can't because the reason you got the job was because it was remote and you don't have a way to get to that office because you're living 80 miles away, and normally you wouldn't commute to you wouldn't have applied for the job if
yeah,
you knew. You wouldn't be working at that company if you knew. In fact, you might even have an offer letter that says this position is remote
yeah. In fact, I know several people that took jobs
because
um,
they were remote.
because they were remote and
Right?
they logistically can't move. Like
That's my point. It's exactly my point.
it's not
And
even
they're black
something. Yeah,
or they're Hispanic or they're whatever. And
yeah.
now they're saying you have to come to the office, but I never got hired in an office. I was never hired in an office. I even applied for the job because I can do this job remotely. Now I have to go to an office.
In fact, they'd be taking a loss of wages going to the office because they may be living in a place, let's say like Houston or Atlanta or
Mhm.
a place that economically, right,
It's a little bit less
is better
expensive.
for them. And
Right.
then now you're asking them to move to a higher ticket market like
Yep.
Seattle or the Bay
Yep.
Area where the cost of living is 20-30% more.
Is anybody else talking about this, man? Are you seeing people out there like are these companies that are making these stupid decisions of return to work? Are they thinking about this
I
repercussion?
don't I don't think I don't think they're thinking about this because unfortunately let's just be honest, the population that is affecting adversely also may not have the resources in the deep pockets to go after these corporations that's
Oh
doing that.
man, that just kills my buzz, man.
So if you think about it, like again, when things like I said happen, it hurts more
Yeah,
in the marginalized and underserved
and they
community
can do
because
less about it.
yeah, they really can't do anything about it unless
Mm-mm.
somebody takes up like a action lawsuit. But and the other thing we didn't even talk about is think about you're living in, I'll use New York, a place where you're very comfortable culturally, right? Your kids go to school, socially,
Hmm. Yep.
there's a mental aspect of
You have the
our,
support groups. You have
yeah,
the yeah.
having the support and community. And now you're asking that family or that employee to disenfranchise themselves and move to Iowa or someplace, right?
Right, which
That
basically they're not going to do.
demographically,
They're
yeah.
just not going to do. I mean, let's face it, they're not going to do it. If I had to make that decision for my family, I would decide against it because I could probably get a different job, and I would have to gamble that I could get a different job, but it just I wouldn't do it. So you're literally forcing me out.
I actually put a poll up today. I think it was, do you work to live or live to work?
Hmm. I get it.
And
Yep.
you know, people have to really think about why there's so much change and volatility today. Because people are saying, you know what, they open Pandora's box and say, hey, we're gonna normalize your life and all of the things that happen in the corporate workforce, right? To marginalized communities or underrepresented employees, like microaggressions, bias, all of that, it actually goes away now if I'm working at home, isn't it?
Some of it, yeah.
Yeah, some of it, but a
It's
lot of it,
alleviated for sure. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of it is not like you don't have to face it on a daily basis, face to
Yeah,
face.
it's definitely
Heck, you could
alleviated.
turn off Zoom,
Hmm.
right? You may never have to actually show your face. So
Yeah.
people don't want to go back to that because now they have more of a healthy lifestyle, their mindset,
Right.
right? They feel better about themselves and they're allowed to be themselves. If I wanted to grow dreadlocks and I was still doing my job, I should be able to grow dreadlocks and do my job. I don't have to worry about,
Nobody's gonna judge
the
you because you're not in the
backlash of what
yeah.
my manager thinks because I have dreadlocks.
Yeah, man, that's
It's our
yeah.
authenticity. And we
Oh, I
really,
get what you're saying.
it would be great if we could get to a place in society where you're just judged based on, hey, your skills. Last comment I'll say, I was talking to someone yesterday about this is, I was talking to a white guy, a leader in the industry, HR tech, and he said, how can I change this? What can I do? He was like, he actually said, I'd like to hire more people like you, Kevin. And I said, look, you don't need to hire more people like me. You just need to find more people outside of your own demographic group. And how do you do that? You have to be comfortable going to meetup groups and finding those groups. There are people out there with the skills, but most companies hire through referrals over 50%, right? Success in that area. And so when you look at Facebook or you look at their Rolodex and all of their people, who else are they going to hire or defer to? It's the people they know. If they all look like them or come from the same social groups, those are the people that are going to get the jobs. So some of this is just prevalent based on behavioral tendencies. It's not so much, I think we're intentionally saying, hey, you know what, we don't want to
Yeah,
hire a
right.
specific
Yeah,
population.
right. Let's just say the majority of it is unknown. It's like the unconscious bias. It's not on purpose. It's not
Mhm.
intentionally designed to hurt or affect or adversely impact these communities. It's just doing it because it's a matter of the system, like you said. Right now, you can't say that we intentionally made people move into these neighborhoods. It's just that's where the economical uh, benefits were. So nobody designed it the way it is now. This is just the tail end of how it ended up. So yeah, we to change it, we have to change the root of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'd have to change a lot, right? Even the redlining and go back. And
yeah,
I always say diversity is more about economics and power than it is probably about race, right? You know, or do you want to, in order to have true equity, Shally, do you want to give me, if you have $20 in your pocket, do you want to give me 10? Right? You might want me to level up, but also, are you going to give
Well,
up
who's going to pay
anything?
for it? Right.
And there's the challenge. How do we find a balance, to at least allow folks to have those resources to, it's almost the nature of capitalism too, right? It does exploit one thing and promote another.
Yeah, for profit. Yeah, for advantage, for profit advantage. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, wow. As interesting as this conversation is, that we are going to be running out of time here. So I have to ask you my last two questions that I ask
I love
everybody.
it.
And one of those questions is, what would you ask people to think about over the weekend as they're watching the show, and you want them to really deeply chew on an idea or on a thought? Doesn't have to be about what we talked about, but what message do you want them to really think about?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I want people to think about like themselves, look in the mirror and ask yourself, you know, if I looked at your credit card statement, I could tell you what your passion is or what you stand for, what you believe in. I don't
Hmm.
have to listen to what you're saying. I know where you spend your money and your time. That is what your beliefs are. And so if you truly say, hey, I believe in diversity, I want to, diversity recruiting, diversity sourcing, diversity hiring, diversity topics should not go away. It should go viral because we should all be talking about it. It shouldn't just be the diversity chef or Kevin Walters or,
Right, right.
you know,
It's everybody's. I got you.
it's everybody's
So look at
responsibility.
yourself. Look at your actions and your behaviors.
Look at your own, look at your world and say,
It's your own
hey,
bank account. Where did you spend your money? I like that. Go
yeah,
look at
and
your
look,
bank account and find out where you spent your money, and that's going to tell you a lot about what you care about. I love that. That's a good.
and
I'm gonna go do that right now.
can I see? I'm just kidding.
There's a lot of
But
sushi restaurants. I'll tell you that much.
hey, there's your diversity right there. We know you love sushi. But
Yeah,
look at that. And if you really want to make a change, you can make a change. Like you don't need someone else to help you. You just need to figure it out and say, hey, you know what? I want to change how my Facebook friends look. I want to learn more about all the cultures. Well, there's ways to do that. And it starts with you. You got to
certainly.
be intentional and you got to think about it. It's not going to happen organically.
Okay.
Different groups of demographic groups aren't going to just start joining your Facebook friends.
Yeah, right. Just because you asked them to. All right. Well, that's a good meaty one. So, last question: who should be on the show next?
Is why.
Who should be on the show next?
Oh, great question. Oh, wow. I'm gonna say my buddy Andre Boulay.
Ooh, I was just reading a
He's
blog post. Yeah.
Yeah, Andre and I work together, and he's really just a smart, intelligent, like engaging, a guy that just comes in and executes, gets things done. But one of the most, I've worked with a lot of leaders and a lot of people, and he's a normal person. And sometimes you work with people and their identity is their title, right? And then you
Yeah.
get beyond their title and you realize, hey, you know what, this person's not that great of a person, right? Because they hide behind that. And
Yeah.
so I like to being the person that's authentic, like I am who I am. I like dealing with people like you and Andre and people that I know. Like I've known you for, God, maybe 2 decades, right?
Yeah. Something like
And
that.
you're the same guy. Like you have, as much as you've done and accomplished, like you have not been this guy that I can't pick up the phone and call and say, hey, Shally, I need a favor, or I want to
Hmm.
talk to you about this. And I think that's a testament to who you are. So, you know, there's a
And he's
plug
like
for
that.
you
Okay.
just being
That's
a real successful champion of not only diversity, but also of just, working with just intelligent and great and bright folks and being collaborative. Um,
Yeah. I love raising people up. That's yeah. Well, you know that. So That's great. I mean, that's a really good endorsement. I actually was literally reading something of his this morning. So, you must have been reading my mind. That's a good one. Wow. Well, listen, man. You're gonna have to try to make that sancocho at some point, and next time I'm in Vegas, which for HR Tech, let's get back
Okay.
together if I don't see you sooner. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to come back again, and I will have your dish next time you come to Vegas. We'll figure a way for me to pitch. Maybe I'll be doing my pitch at HR Tech, but we'll figure a way for
All
me to.
right. Yeah.
I'm gonna be scared to make your dish, but I'm gonna give it a
Ah,
shot.
you can't get it wrong. It's basically all the leftovers put in a pot.
Love it.
All
Great
right, man.
stuff, man. This is awesome. Thanks for having me. And
All right,
that,
everybody. Have a great weekend and be
all right.
kind to each
Take
other.
care.